We're talking about a paternity test that was so explosive that it destroyed contracts, blew up group conversations, and crushed hearts in the court film that was leaked. In the court video, Mama Jones threw furniture backstage, and Chrissy, oh, she didn't deny it, spoke 6 words. She told me the baby was mine, and I believed her for years until Jim Jones stormed out of the studio straight into a lawyer's office and got divorced. His eyes were crimson, his hands were shaking, his voice cracked, and he seemed to have stopped talking. This isn't a scene of hip-hop and love anymore. Rather, it's a scandal that the devil himself wrote. It was supposed to be just another day. In court, a routine hearing over some old contract concerns with VH1, but Jim's team found something next that you won't believe she signed. It was words that made the entire internet yell, "I did what I had to. Excuse me, sis. You lied about a whole baby, you." False timeframes, wedding specials, and a ride or die brand were all crafted while hiding a truth that could destroy Dipset down, because this mess is just getting started. When Jim Jones arrived with the sealed package, a lawyer, and the "I'm done" expression, Chrissy was already at the table going through her phone as if it were any other Thursday. However, her expression changed when she looked up and saw the Modger packet in his hand, which contained the results of a DNA test that would literally, not metaphorically, set the courthouse on fire. Mama Jones had to be removed after breaking a display screen and yelling, "I told y'all." Court insiders claim that she was lying. There was a privately obtained paternity test in that envelope, which wasn't done by VH1 or a hospital, and Jim had gone missing. The test wasn't just for the child Chrissy claimed was theirs. It was also related to a second child, which Chrissy claimed Jim had died in the womb. The twist is that the second child is actually alive and breathing, and Jim isn't the father of either for years. Chrissy recounted the same fairy tale about how she and Jim were working things out and taking their time building an off-camera future while she was allegedly paying a clinic employee and fabricating DNA documents to maintain a 2-family lie behind closed doors. The internet went viral shortly after Chrissy's lie about a free Jim was revealed, and then the real bomb came when a voicemail from Chrissy to her former publicist surfaced. It read, word for word, "If the second test comes back negative, stall him and tell him the lab lost it or something. I just need until the reunion airs what's going on." According to Jim's legal team, they have found inconsistencies in the translation of chronological documentation. Chrissy allegedly altered birth certificates and repurposed old ultrasound film to convince Jim that everything was authentic. "I always wondered why she never let me come to the appointments," said a friend of Jim's. But Chrissy is acting in a way that is brand-level sabotage rather than emotional manipulation. He was convincing when he said things like, "I want one, thing that's just for me or you." Jim trusted her because, let's face it, he's not the easiest man to love, even if he'll admit that. But loyalty was the one thing he never faked. As a result, when he found out about the voicemail leaks, lab reports, and burned phone records, Jim was devastated. According to courtroom reporters, Jim couldn't even look at Chrissy when the judge asked, "Mr. Jones, do you want to move forward with filing for legal separation based on this new evidence?" Didn't even blink, cry, or move in her seat. Instead, she crossed her legs, folded her arms, and said, "What does it even mean to survive a phony romance reality show or fantasy existence based on fabricated test results that will always bother Jim?" It wasn't about the baby, according to reports, because Chrissy had a similar incident in 2011, a pregnancy concern that ultimately turned out to be part of a larger dispute with production. This wasn't even her first time pulling a practical joke like this. "You can't make this up." They are now partially available because of a screenshot that was leaked, which showed that Jim has requested the immediate termination of any joint commercial endeavors and the complete severance of any reality show. The sources claimed that Jim was truly broken by the humiliation and sense of being used as a prop in someone else's legacy-building process, not even by the DNA fraud that was written against him. Chrissy purportedly knew exactly when to drop the pregnancy card when the ratings dropped, or perhaps it was because Chrissy allegedly did it for years. As if things couldn't get any messier, a new character entered the scene. Yes, the former Cam's lawyer showed the judge a sealed folder containing more film relevant to the paternity chronology just before the court recessed, proving that the sibling who everyone thought was no longer in the picture had never left. To put it simply, the video, which court sources claim was shot in 2018, shows Chrissy and Cam. Related intentional deception and reputational sabotage result in emotional damages. Together in Miami, the same weekend she told Jim she was in Sedona for a wellness retreat, yes, a hotel room, and Jim didn't think the room and the receipt for 2 toothbrushes were a coincidence. That's exactly where we begin part 2, when Cam's video is shown to the court in a new courtroom. The lights in the courtroom dim slightly as the projector comes to life, and everyone watches as Chrissy's defense fails in real time when a witness comes forward because the DNA test was just getting started. A grainy timestamp appears on the screen as the judge leans in and looked up from his bench at 10:42 p.m. on August 14, 2018 in Miami, and Chrissy was walking down a hotel hallway with her head down and her phone pushed. She looked around, knocked twice on a door, and it opened, and suddenly the entire courtroom was on camera. The video changed to an interior view because this was no longer just a coincidence, a chance meeting, or a longtime acquaintance. It was proof of the kind that slams doors shut and destroys relationships, as evidence demonstrates. When Chrissy entered the room, she took off her sweatshirt to reveal a tank top and sweatpants. She then leaned in and muttered something before the screen went silent. There was no audio or graphic footage, but the damage had already been done, and Jim sat motionless. When the court asked him if he needed a recess, he waved it off, stone-faced and unblinking. Chrissy didn't flinch, but her lawyer immediately got up and objected to the video, stating that it wasn't proven. When your client told the judge that she was in Sedona on this specific date, the judge looked irritated, for there to be a contradiction, and a falsehood on the record, and the court was just wrapping up that video. Kay's lawyer appeared again with the assurance that we weren't done. He handed over another USB, this time containing a voice memo that said, "As long as Jim thinks the kid is his, I have leverage and won't give it up." It was allegedly taken from Chrissy's old backup account, and the court approved it. Chrissy's voice played calmly and icily, and you could hear a pin drop until I realized where I was standing with Cam. Is back in the room, guards holding her, chair, and she started crying again, but this time it wasn't a loud, agitated kind of cry. Instead, it was a silent one, and Jim just closed his eyes. No one moved, not even the court reporter, and the judge cleared his throat before saying, "Go ahead." Cam's legal team briefly hesitated when they discovered bank records showing that 2 weeks before the claimed miscarriage prescription processing of confidential results translation, Chrissy sent $7,000 to a private OBGYN in New Jersey. She paid to have Jim's attorney stood up after the second test was removed from the records. At this point, Your Honor, we would like to formally request a motion to look into identity concealment and prenatal fraud regarding the paternity claims. We also plan to present these findings to the district attorney's office. Chrissy didn't blink, but her face lost some of its color, making her appear vulnerable and human for the first time. The judge was cornered, nodded, and noted that the evidence was accepted. Then, in a development no one had expected, the court called a surprised witness. Witness C, a former Chrissy assistant, was terrified and shook when she took the stand, clutching her wallet as though it were her soul. "I managed Chrissy's social calendars and travel from 2017 to 2020, and she hesitated before responding, 'Personal messaging.'" The judge asked, "Did you witness any activity related to paternity fraud or public deception?" She looked at Jim and then at Chrissy, and she said, "Yes," forcing me to delete text message chains before Jim got home. And when she made me, why did she want to send those pictures? She explained that she needed promo-ready graphics for the upcoming season pitch. When the judge asked if there had been any discussion about Cameron, the assistant nodded and said that she used to text him from a burner. The judge then allowed the next question, which asked if there had been any talk about it. I had to pick one reunion, and Jim looked at her with despair rather than anger, as if someone had just given him a tone-up for her when she said things like, "Jim is starting to show indications of suspicion, or wait for your response until after midnight." It appeared as though she was leading 2 lives. The courtroom was silent again, but the internet was bustling outside with bloggers' phones up and hashtags trending. Chrissy Burner's phone was charred, and as if that weren't enough, the court played one last audio clip for the day, while she sat there with her eyes fixed on the floor and no reaction or tears, proving that chart Jim deserved better. It was Chrissy off camera during a mid-con talk, and it was recovered via 11 Hip Hop. The judge paused the video halfway through, looked over his spectacles, said nothing, and shook his head. The court was adjourned for the day, so Jim slowly got up and turned to leave Mama Men in check. He receives too much truth, and he leaves. That's how they all are following Chrissy Jones, who stays seated alone as if he realized that the gang had finally caught up, but there was still one more twist to the mayhem. According to the production staffer who claimed to have recorded it during a backstage moment in 2022. One of Jim's former business associates approached the speaker as media gathered outside and said, "More emails, money trails, and a voicemail from a Love and Hip Hop executive are coming up," which shows that the pregnancy plot was proposed months before it was shot. With BH1 insiders already revealing information, what does it imply? It suggests that Chrissy lied to America as well as to Jim, and that every brand transaction interview and fabricated ring on the finger moment is now being re-examined under the microscope of fury. We haven't even reached part 3 yet, but even Mona Scott is allegedly under pressure to make an unedited film that could reveal the true story behind the entire pregnancy arc. Production note: stylists are coming forward, but one more betrayal ruins any chance of reconciliation because Jim lost faith in court orders for Chrissy's financial accounts after hacked emails were made public. The next morning, Chrissy showed up at court without a glam squad, a producer in her ear, and a whispering strategy that was Jim's legal team offered a new exhibit, a printed chain of internal emails between Chrissy and a fired VH1 executive, with the subject line dictating Jim's story plot elements, time cues, and "Let's lock in the pregnancy scare for episode 3, which buys me time before I have to explain the story." The emails were heavier than anything she had ever worn, and she had lost years of her life. She kept her head down, marched right through security to her seat, and waited when reporters called her name because she already knew what was going to happen at precisely 9:30 a.m. "Manan, could you confirm that this is your communication?" the judge asked, raising an eyebrow in response to a statement made by Chrissy at the bottom of one thread about the Miami trip game. Even her own attorney seemed surprised. Chrissy pauses and nods. "Yes, Your Honor, I sent that." Nobody in the courtroom had to gasp, since they could already sense how Chrissy had entirely turned from being a reality star to the antagonist in her own Jim. Throughout the series, she had not spoken at all, and he sat quietly observing while occasionally drinking water as if the heartache had ended. And this was just business. But a court technician wheeled in the last piece of evidence, an authenticated, time-stamped iCloud voice note from Christy dated a year ago, because she heard her talking to someone on speaker, which is why I said the baby was his. He needed to believe in something, and I needed him to stay until the spin-off, when it was greenlit, and the room was completely. Jim's lawyer stood up and carefully pushed back his chair as he walked over to the bench. "Your Honor, we are presenting this as conclusive proof endorsing deliberate emotional manipulation and corporate deception." Next, things really went south. Jim's team filed a formal application to freeze all joint accounts and assets until further investigation was completed, and the judge granted it. Next, it was announced that federal auditors would be reviewing Chrissy's business filings and charitable contributions, donations, and digital transfers associated with her brand. The court clerk presented her lawyer with a subpoena package that looked thick enough to shatter a windshield, but Chrissy didn't say anything, didn't dodge questions, and didn't cry. She just looked exhausted, like a woman who had finally realized that the plot she had written was emailing her back with court orders, evidence files, and receipts that she couldn't change. However, it didn't stop there, because outside of the courts, the internet, and Instagram sites that had supported her, like as a group of wolves altered the captions, Chrissy transformed into Chrissy, who played us all, and conversations were rife with side-by-side comparisons of instances in which Chrissy pretended to cry over her pregnancy, but the real timing told a different story. The most outrageous part was when a leaked VH1 internal chat showed producers making jokes about pregnancy arcs. She assured us that this wasn't just betrayal, but rather a production-wide performance that was orchestrated for views, motivated by lies, and funded with emotional money that Jim never gave his consent to. The judge asked, "Do you have anything to add before we conclude today's hearing?" To which Jim finally stood up, walked to the center of the room, took a deep breath, and said, "I just want peace. I want my time back, not retribution. I want the proper telling of my tale." He left without turning around or making any noise, leaving only a man emerging from the remains of a life that never existed. But Chrissy wasn't done as soon as the court session ended. The statement from the publicist who leaked the voicemails, on her behalf, said, "Chrissy understands the damage done to her feelings by trying to avoid watching TV and focus on healing in private.